having more refined taste, like looking put together, looking as though they're capable and strong and confident, and being able to back that up. And two, like I lace in a lot of like, I always talk about critical thinking skills and a lethal skill set. Make the savage distinguished. It's my big tagline.
I'm Stephanie Keith.
And I am Tara Manjakovic, and we are unapologetically outspoken. Hey, everybody, welcome to Motivation Manifestation Monday. And Stephanie and I are super excited because today we have an awesome guest with us. We have Walt Settlemyre from the Distinguished Savage podcast. And we have been fortunate enough to be guests on his podcast a few months ago. And we just fell in love with him. He's an amazing guy. So Walt, welcome to the podcast. And we are excited to have you here.
I'm excited to be here. And I don't think I can live up to that introduction. I'm hoping I will try. I will try.
I got to tell you, when Tara told me that we were going to be on your podcast, I was like, Distinguished Savage. Oh my gosh, this is like such an honor because it just sounds like so cool and just very I don't know, it's got a vibe to it. So tell us about what the Distinguished Savage means to you.
Man, that's a great question. And it's an enigma wrapped in a riddle kind of. But it has a thought process. I talked about starting a podcast forever. And, like everybody, I'm like, oh, I could have a podcast or I could do this and talk about it for years. And then I started thinking about what would Tim Ferriss actually said once, if you ever do something, you scratch your own itch. And I'm into guns and self-defense and shooting and knives. But I also worked in high-end men's retail for a long time, right? So, and my mom was an executive. So I like to dress well. I like to dress for whatever the occasion is. Doesn't mean necessarily it's always wearing a suit, right? I like to dress well for whatever the occasion is and look like I'm put together, look like I know what I'm doing, right? But I also want to be able to conceal carry or have a weapon on me, or you'll be able to move in that clothing, that kind of thing. And you just didn't see that in the tactical world, right? Or because I was in the military, right? I was a tactical medic. I've been in EMS and special operations and rescue for the longest, and all those have a uniform and that kind of thing, right? And you just expect certain things with that. But for how men dress every day, now, especially in Austin, right? Because I've been in Austin almost 22 years now, right? So here, if you're wearing a sport coat, people look like, who's this guy? All right, who do you think you are? Right? It's that town, right? It's keep it weird, Austin kind of a thing. But when I lived in Houston, when I lived in Dallas, when I lived in Los Angeles, right? People dressed well, right? Well, even if they're just jeans and a shirt, they dressed well. They looked like they were put together. And I wanted to meld those two worlds sort of, because there were guys doing it, right? Craig Douglas from ShivWorks, who was arguably a incredibly capable man of handing you your ass, right? Loves to dress well, loves the finer things, right? But he also is able to run a gun really well. He can, he's physically physically, or with an edge weapon, with an impact weapon, that guy can really hand you his business card, as I like to say, right? And so I didn't see a lot of guys doing that. I see guys everybody wants to be tactical. Everyone wants to have 5'11". I love 5'11". Early on, I was like, oh, this guy with the 5'11s. I love 5'11 gear, right? But I love it for its specific thought process, right? If I'm going to the range, then they make some stuff that they call, either off-duty gear, or they make stuff that's, a little more low vis, as they call it in executive protection, right? That's like chinos, and I have some of that stuff too. But I wanted this whole thought process of dressing well, of being able to move and be comfortable. Because first things guys say is I don't like a monkey suit. I don't want to be a suit. It's not comfortable. And I'm like, man, you haven't been in a suit in a long time, because the technical fabrics that come out now, four-way stretch is the best thing that happened to anybody anywhere. And I think we can all agree on that, right? But it just this whole thought process of melding these two mindsets of being both a gentleman or lady, because I see women who are distinguished savages as well. And I love that thought process. And it was this whole thought process of someone being, having more refined taste, looking put together, looking as though they're capable and strong and confident, and being able to back that up. And two, I lace in a lot of I always talk about critical thinking skills and a lethal skill set. Make the savage distinguished is my big tagline when I sign off. And I believe heavily in that, because that was my whole thought process. I didn't see that in the tactical slash EMS slash military, all that world, right? It was always like, I want to look like I just came off from a contracting gig in Africa somewhere, right? And I'm like, you can't always rock that look, right? It's a little telling, right? So that's where the whole thought process came from.
I love it. I used to be in pharmaceutical sales where we had to
Mhm.
dress nice every day, and I
Mhm.
miss that because
Yeah.
I loved it. It was crazy in the morning. As soon as I would always wear like a really nice dress and like nice heels and designer bags. The
Hmm.
moment I had that on, I like morphed into a different person. I was so
Yes,
confident and just so sure of myself. And it was a whole vibe just from dressing nice.
absolutely.
And it actually was more comfortable. Like I would wear a dress like that any day over jeans. Like it was
Mhm.
pretty comfortable, but I miss that. I don't ever have a reason to dress nice anymore. So now I just
I know,
wear
I
jean
know.
shorts.
Yeah, when I worked in retail. I worked on Rodeo Drive. I worked for a company called Ixies, which was a Japanese-based company that had more of an Italian sort of a flair. They had another company called Kent and Kerwin, which was very traditional British sort of vibe, polo-esque sort of, more of that British cricket sort of a vibe. Wasn't my thing, but and I worked for Bernini on Rodeo, right in the middle of Rodeo, and carried some awesome lines then too, which was really interesting. And you saw a lot of interesting psychology. Side note, but I miss wearing a suit, dressing sharp, wearing sport coats. And so I still get to here and there some, right? When if I'm going to go do something, but I started looking at it from a point of view of like, if I'm going down to the coast to surf, like I look like I'm ready to surf, but I also I'm not just going to throw on like something like some crazy shorts and a crazy shirt that doesn't match, right? I want to have a flow too. And that flow, like you said, it really does sort of, you become that person a lot of ways. I'm going to go, I mean, I haven't golfed in years. I kind of lost my fascination with it, but I look like I was a golfer even before I knew how to play decently, right? Which is still questionable if I knew how to play decently. But whenever I'm doing something, I'm dressed for that occasion. And I always look at it as like when I put on a uniform for work or put on a uniform when I was in the military, whatever I was doing, right? That's your suit of armor that you're putting on to do something. And now as I sort of move into executive protection, right? Those guys were always wearing suits, but you have to have suits that have that stretch to them, are comfortable, that you can wear a lot of things under, that you can carry a lot of different loadout under a suit and still look like have a good silhouette of a suit. But that's your it's who you are, and people interpret that, right? I've talked to Dr. Dante Bryan on it. He's been on the show a couple of times. Fascinating guy. You guys should talk to him. He's incredible. But he talked about like, people look at you differently when you dress, right? And you get sometimes you have friends who don't dress that way, especially if you start dressing well, start bettering yourself, for lack of a better term. Like friends who are like, oh, who does he think he is, right? That kind of thing. And same with you saw in pharmaceutical sales. You put on this outfit, right? That's your uniform for the day. That's your outfit. This is like me going into the world saying, this is who I am. This is what I do, right? That's how I've always looked at it.
Yeah, that was something for me because wearing a uniform basically my entire adult life, either fire
Mhm.
service or law enforcement uniform. And then when I transitioned to detectives, I'm in those, 511 cargo pants
Mhm.
and the collared shirt. And when I wasn't in that quote uniform, I was in workout clothes. And if
Mhm.
you looked in my closet, I had a ton of dresses because I love to dress up, but I never went anywhere. So I didn't use any of them.
Yeah.
And when I left law enforcement and I moved to Texas, the place where I work is fairly low key.
Mhm.
So I was showing up basically in my workout clothes. And I finally got to this point where I was like, okay, I'm in this mode of self development and trying to present like the best version of myself. And part of that to me was stepping into another level of myself that actually looked the part and
Mhm.
wanting to look more presentable and more professional. And I actually feel better when I dress nicer.
Yes.
So the first few months I'm literally in, my yoga pants and tennis shoes, and I finally started stepping it up and I'm wearing nicer clothes. I'll put on some jewelry every now and then. And I just feel better when I dress a little more elegant. And
Mhm.
like, I love elegance. Like, black and white movies are my favorite. My favorite
Yes.
actress of all time is Myrna Loy. And I
Yes.
look at her as just like this beacon of elegance. She's like grit and grace personified. And
Yes.
that is
Oh,
what I aspire to. but I have spent so much of my life in a uniform or in workout clothes that in the beginning I felt kind of fraudulent trying to dress nicer.
Yeah, I totally get that because I'm a huge Cary Grant fan. And you look at some of the old Cary Grant movies, always, even when he's dressed casually, just very stylish, but that also carries a sense of confidence, a sense
Right.
of self assurance, like, and again, like you said, and that's a perfect way of putting it, like that elegance and grit and grace all together. And I love that. You see that, and when you see a man or a woman like who they wear the clothes don't wear them, right? And you tell they're comfortable in their own skin, they're comfortable in what they're wearing, and they present this front to the world, like, front for lack of a better term, not, but it that usually speaks to what their personality is, what their strengths, and that's I've always loved that. I've always loved that, and I like doing that. Right? I'm very particular about what I wear, how I dress, and where I'm going. If I'm going to the gym, I'm wearing certain things, right? If I'm going like out with my girlfriend to, we're going to go to dinner or something, I can wear very specific things. I will put out specific vibes for different things, right? And sometimes I want to be put out a different vibe than what I am. Like we get down to the coast to, if we get on the coast to surf, because we're not far from Corpus and Port Aransas, right? And there's a couple spots down there, right? Better for paddle boarding, not great surf like when I lived in Hawaii by any means, but when I go down there, I look like any other surfer guy going down there, right? But I mean, I'm always carrying, and I always look like like I've got my shit together, right? But it's the way, and dressing like that makes you carry yourself in a different way, right? If you're just going to the store, if I'm going to the store in like sweatpants, I even get weird about that sometimes. Like I'll clean the car up, I have some sweatpants on. I don't like wearing flip flops out anymore because if I do get in a fight, I'm like, that'll be the one time I get in a fight. It's when I'm wearing flip flops, right? When I'm like, oh, the guy got his feet stepped on, right, and lost my. But like if I'm wearing sneakers, I'm wearing a t-shirt. It presents a something to the world, right? And people read that even when they don't even realize they read it. They read it, right? And I think that's one of the things. I mean, people see in a uniform too. We carry ourselves different wearing a uniform. I carry myself very differently when I'm wearing my uniform for work, and it's it's interesting how people interact with you depending on what you're wearing and how you present yourself.
I think so too. And do you guys notice? My husband and I talk about this all the time. How like our grandparents' generation and earlier, they
Mhm.
all took pride every single time they stepped out of the house, even if they were just going to the grocery store. It's like the clothes that they wore, it's like the women wore dresses and the guys had a
Mhm.
hat that they would put on and everything was coordinated. And then like our parents' generation came around, just screwed it all up and, and everyone got
Mhm.
really sloppy. But I feel like no one does that anymore. Like we don't respect ourselves as much or really give a second thought to how we're going to present ourselves maybe when we go places. And I just feel like as a society, we've kind of shifted away from that. And it's sad. I wish we would go back to that a little bit.
Yeah, I agree. You look at all these old Depression era, like people are in soup lines and they're wearing like a sport coat, right, and a hat, and I think I feel like as I've gotten older, I've grown into my nose because I didn't know I had a big nose until I was in high school and a teacher told me, which is interesting, right? Because you don't notice something about yourself, right? And I'm like, dude, I have my dad's nose. There's no question, I'm his kid. Right? But as I've gotten older, I feel like I've grown into hats. I tried hats as I was younger, like baseball caps. Anybody pulls that off, right? But to grow into like other caps, like the paperboy style caps, which are my favorites, right? Um, because I've obviously from my logo for the podcast, I got very Peaky Blinders sort of a vibe. I have a very classic style of dress.
Oh, I think Walt's frozen.
Yep. We'll give him a second.
Yeah.
You guys must be having some internet issues in Texas.
I guess.
Well, I hope he comes back on. But yeah, like I miss that. I look at old movies like you were talking about, and it's like everyone looked good all the time.
Yeah.
But people were like that in their day to day too. It was like a big deal.
Yeah. And now it's like people look, and I'm one of them. Like sometimes I look at what I'm wearing and I'm like, oh, I'm just going to the store. But
Me too.
I saw me going to the store, I'd be like, what is she wearing?
I know. I am the same way, and especially after having kids, it's like
I
you
can't
know,
bother.
I'm like, why even get dressed? They're gonna smear peanut butter on me or, something. So I don't. But there's
There we
Walt, you
go.
were frozen.
You guys froze too, but I wasn't sure. And I said some amazing things.
Of
And
course you did.
Well, we were just still talking about how everyone used to dress so nice. And now
yeah,
it's not really expected anymore. And it's just easier not to. But I think that can have an impact on your mindset, especially in work,
yeah.
especially for kids in school. If you wear sweatpants, like, are you going to be as like focused and have good posture and show up the same way as you would when you're nice pants and nice shoes? I don't know.
You're not, and that's interesting. You mentioned that. I've no, like, if I'm wearing workout clothes and go, like, you definitely have you feel different, right? And so, it's like Tony Blauer from Spear says, like, the mind navigates the body. And often, right, you have a different sort of, like, you're a little more casual, a little more, especially like you said, sweatpants or, what is something like that. Whereas if you're dressed a little nicer, you seem to want to sit up a little taller, shoulders back a little more, chest out a little more. And one of the things I said, I don't know if you guys caught it, but, it's become cool to act as though you don't care about how you dress.
Yeah.
And that's interesting to me because you care about how you dress, right? You wear certain things, or to say, I mean, it's part of, like, the whole, uh, iconography when we talk about situational awareness and uh, in baselines and anomalies. People are we talk about, we wear things and we show people things that we're interested in, whether it's the stickers on our car, the clothes we wear, women's purses, right? And it's interesting how those things say a lot about us. We want to tell people about what we're interested in, what we like, and or what we try to pretend like we don't care about. Like the standard, I always call it the standard issue uniform for most Austin musicians is black low top chucks and black skinny jeans and a black band T-shirt of some kind, or just a black T-shirt. And they all have that vibe, right? And you can always tell. But every little tribe has their way of dressing, and it's fascinating to me, like that whole idea of people like, oh, I don't care what how people think of me. I'm like, oh yeah, you do, my friend, you do.
You do.
Let's not kid each other.
Yeah. And unfortunately, like, it does matter in the world. I mean, I learned that when I had to hire people and I was interviewing people all day long. Like, you do start picking people apart and noticing the
Mm-hmm.
person that came in with the wrinkled shirt and notice the person that didn't wear a tie to the interview. I mean, I even had a boss tell me one time, she's like, oh yeah, looks absolutely matter. And you better be, bringing your best every day to work. And it is true. It's like, if you look, maybe like you're sloppy, people are going to
Yes.
think you're sloppy, and even
Yep.
at work, like my husband works in the hospital and he's like, there's people like me that have wrinkle free, like nice fitted scrubs. And then there's
Mhm.
people that have like the wrinkly scrubs are like way too big or whatever. And it just looks
Yep.
sloppy. And then people think, they just assume, well, you must not be as good at your
Yep.
job as the person that
Absolutely.
looks like that. So there is comparison that goes on without us even realizing it consciously.
Oh yeah, I see it all the time. I see it's interesting, and that's a great point you bring up. It's you because there's a couple of jobs that I can say specifically. I'd like to think that my personality, and my interviewing skills hopefully got me in there as well. But I remember two specific times where I came in, and I used to have this. I since grew out of it, just working out more and more, and like shoulders got a little big for it, right? But I had this beautiful navy blue Armani suit that I begged, borrowed, and steal to be able to buy, right? And that was the interview suit, man. And that suit, I can say for sure, got me two jobs. Because afterwards, they're like, what impressed me most is you wore a suit and you wore that suit. The suit didn't wear you. You looked like you knew what you were doing. And one was my job with Austin EMS, right? Nobody else wore a suit, right? EMS, if people are going to roll in, and I think the most dressy you're going to get is khakis and a polo shirt. And I'll wear khakis and a polo shirt all the time, most of the time, right? But it's going to be very specific. Polo is very specific. It's not going to be just your run of the mill stuff, and it's going to be not wrinkled. It's going to fit me well, right? And it's going to be something that fits my body type. It's the biggest thing is get yourself a tailor or a seamstress and get your
Yes.
act together, right? But
It's huge. That's
yeah, exactly.
when I see a guy that's wearing an oversized sweatshirt that's like three sizes too big, and he, like, you don't even know what he looks like. And all it says to me is you're insecure, you have no self-confidence, and you have no idea how to carry yourself. When I see a guy who is in clothes that fit and he walks with confidence and his shoulders aren't slumped forward and he's not trying to hide in his clothes, that's the guy that gets my attention. That's the guy that I say, like, okay, that guy's got his shit together.
Yep, exactly. I tell you, speaking of Craig Douglas again, he said something on when he was first on my podcast, and God, I wish I'd have said this, but he made a great point because I've bought a lot of things. Well, I'll tell you the quote, and I'll tell you this after that. He said, "Good tailoring should inspire fear and lust in both sexes." And I'm like, that's brilliant, right? That's amazing. Yeah. But because a lot of guys like, oh, I don't have the money. And I'm like, look, I picked up a great Hugo Boss 3-button black blazer that for $14 at a thrift store, right? I love thrift store finds because I worked in retail. I am not going to pay that 1,000% markup. Just won't do it, right? But you know what you're looking for, or have somebody who knows what they're looking for, right? And you can find great stuff at thrift stores, Mercari or eBay, right? I just got a great Armani suit on Mercari for $150. It retails for about $2,200, right? It cost me $250 in tailoring, but I'm still way under budget on that thing because I picked it up for an EP course that I'm going to. But
well, yeah, and I think people forget about tailoring in our generation too. Like, you don't have to throw everything out and go buy new stuff. You can take stuff you have in your closet and just get it tailored, because a lot of times if something doesn't look good, it's because it doesn't fit you right. And you would get along great with my husband, by the way, because he gets all of his clothes tailored. He is bald. He shaves his head. He loves a good hat. You guys would probably be like best friends.
I want to meet that guy. That's incredible.
Yeah, but he gets everything tailored. And I think that just all started because his grandma sewed and would like fit everything, for him. So he just got used to that. But you don't see a lot of people doing that nowadays. And it really is.
Don't you feel good when you're out with him and he's dressed and he looks like his clothes fit and he's comfortable in them and he's rocking whatever he's wearing? Like, that makes you feel good being with him.
We might not be married today if you didn't dress good, because that was one of the things that drew me to him.
Yeah, like you said, man, like to your point before, like when you interview somebody, coming in, we used to call it in the Army, Joe shit the rag man, right? You come in looking like a soup sandwich, as we would say, right? That doesn't inspire, faith, trust, and hope in people, right? You're like, if this guy's sloppy, he's probably going to, if he dressed sloppy, he's probably going to be sloppy in his work, right? And not always true. And you can try to not to say always and never, but the odds are pretty high. Like if they don't really care about that, then what else don't they care about?
Yeah. Okay. This is like kind of off the subject, but it's a really funny story. So I got to just tell you the craziest interview experience I ever had. Yeah. This guy, I don't even know how he got through the HR like phone interview, but he comes to the interview with his kid and then asks us to babysit his kid like while he's in the interview. So I'm like, okay, that's weird. But then I was like, who knows? Like maybe something happened and like his babysitter canceled, whatever. And again, like dressed very sloppy, like super wrinkled, shirt, no tie, nothing. And then he started like making all these really uncomfortable jokes. It was like so inappropriate. Ooh. And then he's like, please, you've got to hire me because I have a bunch of dental work that I need done. And I really need the money. So I really need you to hire me. And we were like, oh my God, it was the most awkward thing ever. And I didn't even know what to say. And I was like, thank you for coming in. And my boss was he's like, I'm sorry, but we can't babysit your child while you're in here. Like, just go home, take your kid with, and good luck with your dental work. But I'm like, oh my gosh, what are people thinking? You got to present yourself well.
I feel awkward just hearing the story.
Right?
I've just recently, last week, had to have a conversation with my staff because the popular thing right now is ripped jeans. And I'm not talking like small rips, like there's more exposed skin than there is jean. And my boss made a comment to me like, what the hell's going on? Like, he calls them biblical pants because they have holes in them. And he's like, we need some kind of rule where there's no biblical pants. And I'm like, yeah, I hear you. It does look totally unprofessional. And I get that that's the trend right now, which I really don't understand. And I feel totally old because I don't understand the way young people dress these days. I feel like my grandmother, but
I get that.
for a workplace, it's just totally inappropriate.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, speaking of young people, I have a 13-year-old. I shit you not, they are wearing like the same exact clothes that I wore when I was 13. Like everything from the 90s is really, really cool right now. And it's just so like odd. I'm like, it was such a like sloppy look and they just love it. And I'm like, man, like I would have liked that back when I was that age. And now I'm like, what the hell? That looks so bad. What are you doing? I guess
think
moms always think that about their kids' clothes though.
Yeah, it's interesting to see because I know like the big thing, really, especially in men's fashion, has got to be this like super uber tapered leg, and there's not a lot of dudes who can pull that off well, especially me, right? I'm what 5'10", like on a good day, and and I've got like muscular legs, right? So a tapered pant on me is horrendous, right? And it just doesn't work. So and then again, that's when we go to like I go to a classic, more fuller trouser. But too, like you see people who like, oh, well, this is a trend. Oh, I want to do that because it's the cool trend, right? And I'm just like, oh, my friend, that is not a good look with the skinny jeans for you. Like, because
No.
some people are gonna look like an ice cream cone, then like you get some guys who look like that because they're so skinny, it looks like they look like a heroin addict. I'm like, it's interesting to see like the trends and things now, but this whole like super tapered, and a friend of mine, Dustin Wright was on EP guy, and he was talking about guys wearing the I think the joggers, the jogger style pants with a suit jacket, and he's like, "Hey man, that's not a suit, bro. It's not what we do here. Right? We dress professionally. It's not. I know you won't be comfortable in the pants, but like there's comfortable pants you can get. Sort your shit out, right? So
Yeah,
Yeah,
it just
it's just huge how much clothing really does affect the way you come across to people and your own mindset and your own confidence level. And maybe it sounds stupid, but it's something that I firmly believe in.
yeah, oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. You see, because you can, I mean, you would assess people when you were working in law enforcement. You assess people by what they're wearing, right?
Oh,
If
yeah.
it's certain style that certain groups of people wear, right? Like, are they a gang member? Are they wearing certain colors? Are they wearing certain things? Are they wearing, is it baggy, right? Where's their hands? All these different things. And we all, even at some level, we all assess these things. We assess colors, we assess what somebody's wearing, we assess like all these little things. And we put people in boxes, right? I think for you and I, probably, Tara, we look at it more from a safety point of view, right? Like what's the anomaly in the baseline kind of a view, where some people are like, oh, look at this guy, right? Or whatever. But like, for us, I think we probably, just from doing the jobs we've done, we look at it a little bit differently. But from anybody, from a self-protection point of view, right? You've got to, these are cues that we see but don't always pick up on, but you see them in people all the time.
I notice stuff like that. Just, you're
That's
always kind of
awesome.
on guard. But what's so creepy is like people like Ted Bundy that looked like
Hmm.
totally harmless, that were like serial killers. So I'm like, I don't really trust my
Hmm.
judgment because I'd be like, ooh, he's cute or something if
Yeah,
he's like a serial
that
killer.
was his in. That was his in.
Right. Right. So I mean, you never know, but it is true. Like I think even at a subconscious level, we are sort of assessing the situation. And if someone isn't dressed nice or they're very sloppy, you might assume, are they on drugs? Are they, I don't
Hmm.
know. Like I just think that we, whether we consciously realize it or not, we're doing that. But I think too, like back to the whole confidence thing, but also just mental health in general. I remember after I had my second child, the nurse in the hospital was sitting down and like talking with me. Like they give you a whole list of what to prepare for when you go home, blah, blah, blah. And one of the things she said, she was like, make sure that every single day you put on makeup and you get dressed. And I kind of looked at her
Hmm.
like, excuse me, I have an infant to take care of. And she was like, trust me, that one thing can keep you from really spiraling into a deep depression. Just
I can
having,
see that.
making yourself feel presentable and like getting ready for the day absolutely
Hmm.
will help. And I was like, well, that's interesting. I never thought of it that way. And she was right. Like
Yes.
she was absolutely right. It made me feel like a different person. And so, I think that's kind of important to think about too, just hygiene in general. But It's like, can you spend an extra minute or two just doing something for yourself that's going to make you feel a lot better and a lot more confident? And it's going to help you in a whole bunch of ways, depression and everything.
Yeah. That's great advice. That's incredible advice, actually, right? Because there'll be times when my girlfriend's like, she's like, I really want to get some stuff done today, but I didn't, and she's like, I'm gonna get him to take a shower, right? And she takes a shower and she's like, all right, now I'm ready to get things done, right? Sometimes it's just it's that period at the end of a paragraph of what you've been doing so far, right? And a new sentence, starting a new thing. That for me, it's that very much that. Like, love a shower, right? So, like, I've gotten accused of taking too many in a day, right? So, but it's a demarcation line for me. It's like, okay, I'm taking a shower, get ready to do this. All right, now I'm taking a shower, I'm getting ready to do this, right? Or I'm going to go somewhere, I'm going to do this, whatever it is, right? It's a ritual for me, right? It's routine that is important to how I think, how I live, and that type of thing, right? And to something I meant to mention earlier, not to get off that subject, but I use like what people wear, like with women's purses, right? Like I know that I worked when I worked for Bernini, we also had some women's lines, and so I know a little bit about women's clothing, right? So if I see like a purse or something, women's things are their purses, right? Usually men with it's watches sometimes, right? But if I know a certain purse, right, that one, to your point on Ted Bundy, that's a great rapport builder. And like, oh, hey, that's a cute, purse, right? Whether it's, Coach, Dooney Burke, whatever it is, right? Or if it's a Kate Spade, oh, it's a cute Kate Spade, right? Most men don't know those things, right? Or
I don't even know those
things. But those are really interesting things, right? But again, how do people gain rapport with people, right? For me, if I've used it at work, if somebody has like something in their house or they have something I can latch onto, but a lot of times it's clothing. Somebody has a band t-shirt on, or like, oh, that band, this, that, and the other, or they have something that I can latch onto to build rapport, right? You can do that, that's open source intelligence just right there, like in a nutshell. You can use it to get closer to somebody. You can use it to like maybe chill something out, right? It's just interesting how important understanding clothing, how people dress and what they pick is just in our survival alone.
What do you think about like the people like Mark Zuckerberg that just wear the same shirt every single day? That seems to be growing in popularity among like people like that, I guess.
The uber wealthy that dress like they can't afford like a t-shirt.
Yeah, it's like Hanes t-shirts or something.
Yeah. You know what's interesting where that came from is Steve Jobs, right? Wore the same thing every time, all the time, right? And that became his thing. Is like, well, it's one less thing I have to think about. Like I don't have to think about what I'm going to wear because I'm going to wear this. This and it sort of becomes their, I guess, iconic look, and everybody wants to be like Steve Jobs, so they start doing the same thing, right? And so when they wear something else, it almost becomes a sort of a caricature. You're like, well, that's not your usual thing, right? Why are you wearing that? They almost seem uncomfortable with it. I always want to be a chameleon. I want to be able to wear, because first off, I love cowboy boots, right? I've got some great cowboy boots that I've had forever. When I put on boots and jeans, I want to look just as comfortable as I do in boots and jeans as I would in a nice suit and or a sport coat, whatever it is, right? I want to have, be seen comfortable in this. I don't want to wear the clothes, not the clothes wear me. And I think that's again, but you think about like that tech industry, that's kind of trendy to do, like, oh, let's be like Steve Jobs. I don't have to make a decision. So I'm just going to have 50 black shirts and 50 pairs of black pants. And I'm like, I got you, right? Because it's big in Austin, right? The tech crowd wants to, you could be next to a tech millionaire and you wouldn't know because they're wearing I don't know, whatever, like Crocs and which are an abomination.
Oh my God, Crocs are so popular right now, and I know
everybody loves them. Everybody loves them. They are comfortable. I will not deny that, right? But they are an abomination, and I will not go down the. You should get some Crocs. I'm like, no, sir, I will not. I don't know how I got off the Crocs topic. But.
Yeah, I the wild colors too. And I'm just like, I think I'm going to pass on that trend. I'll just stick with, something a little less in your face. So.
Yeah. But, it's interesting. I had a sweetheart of a guy yesterday who had on multicolored Crocs, and he had some, I don't remember, a band t-shirt, older guy. I say older, he's younger than me, right? Like 47, 48, really nice guy. But sort of had the kind of like the hippie musician sort of a vibe going, had like the kind of quirky little shorts on. They were kind of like maybe the old school gym shorts, but had pockets, and the Crocs that were tie-dyed, and like this band t-shirt I haven't heard of, right? Or I think it was a music festival t-shirt, had like, kind of balding on top with a little ponytail. And he was he was just a beautiful soul, right? Really nice guy, because he had some shitty shit happen to him and he made the best of it. And I respect that incredibly. But I'm probably not going to talk to this guy about most of the things that I'm interested in, like, guns or knives or self-defense or anything like that. Because we had a nice chat on the way there. And it turns out he's a musician. I talked about every once in a while I'll get a wild hair and I'll build a cigar box guitar for people, because I thought I was going to try to learn how to play one if I built one, and I would just build them and give them to people as gifts. But that's a whole other conversation. But you really start to have conversations based around what somebody's wearing, right? You kind of know where you can go, where you can't go with a conversation.
Yeah, I agree. My grandma wears Crocs every day. She's got like every color Croc. And the other day she was cooking and she dropped the knife and it landed through the hole in the Croc. I'm like, Grandma, that's like, I don't even know how you did that. That's like hard to do.
Right.
Like, so the damn things are a little dangerous. But yeah, I don't know. Crocs, I'm surprised they've lasted as long as they have, but they're definitely not the most stylish thing.
Yeah. I think it's almost cool to not be stylish. I think that's the thing, is like the styles and trends are so quirky. I've never been a style or trend guy. I've always kind of been like more classic clothing, classic dress, like it just put together sort of a thing. Never been big on the trends.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah. Well, I think when you wear like classic stuff, that's a whole vibe too. It's like,
yeah,
it's kind of cool. Like you're not on trend and you're wearing something that is going to last you more than 3 months, like a lot of the trends we have now.
Yeah. And if somebody started doing a lot of that, I would probably go to something else, right? I don't want to be like everybody else. I want to have a little bit of a different, like, maybe you can't quite put your finger on it, but I want to be a little different. Just like, like I want to have my own thing. I want to have my own thing.
Yeah. So my dad used to always tell me in middle school, he'd be like, are you buying this because it's trendy, or are you buying it because you actually like it? And I'd be like, no, everyone has this. He's like, then we're not getting it. You need to develop your own style. And at the time I was like,
that's amazing.
That sucks, Dad. But now I'm like, that was really cool. That did teach me to like develop my own style. So I appreciate that.
That's amazing. I love that guy.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I think everyone listening, like, it is something to just think about. How do you want to present yourself? Not just for other people, but for yourself. Like, when do you feel your best?
Mm-hmm.
And how can you do that more often? Why do we have to only dress up nice once a year at an event? Like, how can you, maybe it's even just putting on a piece of jewelry, or just like that nurse told me, doing your makeup for the day or whatever. But it's like, find that thing that'll make you show up, stand a little taller, like you said, and be your best self, and not, not just rushing and putting together something and showing up to life, sloppy.
Yeah.
I
will. Oh, go ahead,
to have this mentality where I would like save my good clothes for something. And then you realize like you haven't worn it in 3 years because there hasn't been a special occasion that you felt was worth saving it for. And I finally got into the fuck it mentality. I'm going to wear my nice clothes and enjoy them. That. And it honestly changed my life, because I put on what I feel like wearing and I feel good in my clothes, instead of looking at my closet going, I wonder where I can wear that.
Yeah. That's incredible. I agree, because I used to do the same thing. Especially in I would wear stuff at retail, but I would have things that I wouldn't probably wear working in retail. But even after, I'm like, oh man, I got this. I don't want to wear that just any old time, like that's the special suit, and like when I just start wearing things more just as in a rotation, like I just want to dress well, I want to look like I know what I'm doing, right? Just feel good, right?
Yeah.
And one thing too, and maybe you guys, I'd be curious to get both your reactions on it. I feel like women understand this more than a lot of men do. Women understand, like, because I see more put together women who are dressed well than I do men, right? Guys are just like, I'm just me, man, and I don't want to, like, I don't dress for nobody but me, and and I'm like, all right, bro, I hear you. It's because I get the same things from dudes, like, I want to be comfortable, and I'm like, dude, you've obviously haven't put on a suit in a while, because they are comfortable first and foremost. And
I used to have a boyfriend that would never dress nice. He like refused. And it was like a deal breaker. I'm like, this is ridiculous. Like, we're going to a wedding. You can't put on a nice, suit or something. And that was a big thing in Southern Illinois, where we were from, where guys wear jeans to weddings. It might be a big
Oh,
thing in Texas too, but
oh yeah.
I look
Oh
at
yeah.
it as it's like disrespectful. It's
Hmm.
like, you're at someone's the most important day of their life. Like, show up like you mean it, put some
Yep.
effort into it. So I don't know. I
Yeah.
guess that's because I'm not from an area where people typically do
Yeah.
that, but
It's big here. It's always big here, which blows my mind. But I always feel like, and I wish I'd have said this, right? And I think it's an anonymous quote, but dressing well isn't about self-importance, it's about self-respect. And I think that is so true.
oh my gosh, that I love that. That's like the perfect quote to end with too.
Yes.
So yeah, I think it's going to inspire a lot of people that are listening. We get busy, we get in our routines, we get used to throwing on the same outfits over and over, but it's like,
Hmm.
it really can make a difference in
It
your
does. It does.
confidence and how you're showing up and how people are perceiving you. So I'm feeling inspired. I want to go in my closet now and like
Yes.
rearrange it, get rid of all the sloppy stuff, get some nice things. So very inspiring, Walt. I love it.
I'm telling you, yeah. And I will say, man, thrift stores, Macari, eBay, like you can get some great if you know your body type, right? You can find.
Mhm.
I mean, my best finds have been thrift stores. I have a honey hole thrift store here in Austin. That is, I won't tell anybody. It's a honey hole, right? But it's not in a part of town where you would expect. But they get a lot of stuff from up in Massachusetts, around Boston area. So I found my Hugo Boss 3-button suit. I found a great Perry Ellis. Oh, not suit, but it's a sport coat. I found a beautiful it's like a coffee brown suede shirt jacket, Cole Haan. I paid $25 for that thing. I mean,
Nice.
that's yeah.
I love
And it
getting a
costs.
good deal.
Oh, love a deal.
Yeah.
I love a deal.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome. Well, yeah, that's a good tip. You can always go look at a thrift store. They've got like Poshmark and some of these websites now
Yes.
even. So, yeah, there's a lot. It's not like you have to spend a fortune to look good,
Hmm.
show up, present yourself well. So hopefully this will, inspire everyone for the week ahead and give them some things to think
Yes.
about. But Walt, thanks so much for coming on. Why don't you tell everyone where they can find you and your podcast and all that good stuff?
Mm. Find the Distinguished Savage podcast on most all podcast players, the usual suspects, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, all those. You can find me on Instagram, Distinguished Savage. There's a backup account. I think it's like distinguished.savage or something like that. I rarely use. I just had one because it seemed like the cool thing to do. Well, everybody's getting shadow banned, so that seems like the cool thing
Right.
to get done to you. Right. But Distinguished Savage, and that's pretty much a website will be coming. I've threatened it for a year or two. That's going to be in the works fairly soon. Going to work on a blog with it, like writing about this kind of thing, actually, this kind of stuff. And I think those are the main spot. Those are the main ways.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much for coming on. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I love what you guys are doing. When I first heard Tara on Two Cops One Donut, and then I got to meet you and have you guys on, and now I listen to the show religiously, right? Because I like how you break it up on the Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, and it's always something new and interesting. I love your candor, and I love your genuineness from both of you. It is you guys speak to my soul, and I love that about you.
Well, thank you. That's awesome, Walt. Thanks so much. We feel the same way about you. And
Sweet
hopefully
talkers.
everyone feels like so good now for Monday. We're going to have an amazing week. And we'll be
Yes.
back with our weird Wednesday episode. So stay tuned for that. Thanks everyone for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with a friend, and don't forget to subscribe to the podcast so you get our latest episodes every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And if you could, please rate and review the show. We are going to be reading every single review, and I would love it if you hopped over to Instagram at Unapologetically Outspoken and say hi. We want to see who's out there and start a conversation, plus get all of the topics that you want us to talk about next. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.